presented.
Let me bring Anneliese in.
Well, I think very few people would say that the preparation was there to the degree it should have been. But to be completely honest with you, I'm not here to put blame on anyone. I'm here to say, what can we do to fix this? And my goodness, we need to fix it. And we need to deal with the blockages, and we need to listen to what people on the front line are saying to us and take action. And, that's what we've been trying to do. So, for example, around the enormous shortages that still exist in protective equipment, and, we saw that in the Panorama programme that was on recently, there are shortages. We've set out a whole range of things that we think need to be done to deal with that. Around testing, obviously, we've just missed the target that was set out before. Now, I'm not going to jump up and down and say, isn't that, an incredible thing? We've got to deal with it. We've got to fix it. Well, it was that 100,000 target. Well, I think what Hannah highlighted in her question was that the decisions that have been taken over the last 10 years have left us unprepared. I mean, if you look at social care, for example, we had 120,000 vacancies in social care even before this crisis started. We've been talking about the decisions that were taken in the NHS because of a lack of funding, actually. I mean, we did have that additional funding in the 2000s. We didn't have additional funding from 2010 onwards, and that meant that other longer range questions like preparedness seem to slip off the agenda. We can't be in that situation again.
So you're saying this is partly George's fault?
Well, I don't really care whose fault it was.
I don't know. He's sitting there. You might.
I think the statistics do make the case very, very clearly. I'm not going to kind of point the finger, but we had that lack of preparedness and lack of resilience in our public services. But this is also about, of course, households' financial resilience as well, with now approaching 9% of our population due to be unemployed. We entered this crisis with a quarter of families not having even £100 of savings. And that's after the longest squeeze in living standards that our country has seen for 8 generations, the slowest recovery it's seen after a financial crisis for hundreds of years. Now, that is something that we cannot repeat.
So, George, your record is being called into question here. And also, in terms of Hannah's the financial crisis, and Labour's talked about, or Keir Starmer certainly talked about tax rises as one way out of this.
Well, yes, but I think we've got to be clear. I mean, George suggested that there are only going to be 2 choices, really, about how much more you tax and how much less you spend. But actually, there are 2 other really big choices. One of them goes to the heart of what Paul just said, which is about how we're going to actually boost demand as we start to climb out of this, because we've seen, obviously, people scaling right back on their spending. We're going to have to give people that confidence again. And, of course, what we saw, unfortunately, after 2010 was a reduction in that confidence in many areas, a dropping off in demand. That meant that the economic cake got smaller than it needed to be. It wasn't growing at the same rate. So we need to make sure that we have that growth. But secondly, we need to take decisions about where those cuts in services or increases in tax or reductions in tax fall. And if we look at what happened again between 2010 and 2019, the worst off 10% of people, particularly those with children, saw their incomes fall by 20%, according to the IFS. Best off 10% of people, as a result of successive budgets, they only saw that falling by 2%. So there was a big distributional choice taken by successive Conservative ministers. I'm not saying this to make a party political point, but we've got to have a new settlement after this, not just because, for those of us who don't like that level of inequality and that level of deprivation, that being morally abhorrent, but because it's meant we've got so many people who are in such a difficult, precarious financial situation now that as they fall into unemployment, they just don't have that ballast there. And if we're going to have continued disruption, we can't have that huge block of people in the British population who are in such a difficult economic situation.
Well, I know you want to come back in, George, but talking of people and falling into unemployment, let's hear from another person who contacted us, Alaric Neville.
Hello.
And it won't work to the extent that it could.
Grant, we've had some tweets in about this. So Dan Bradshaw, who's a paramedic,